What's up, everyone? Vince Ingenito here, and I'm here with my good friend, Andrew Zaboki. He's the lead gameplay designer over at Petroglyph Studios. We're here playing Grey Goo. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing excellent. I was a big Universe at War fan, so this is a very exciting day for me. I know we got some other fans out there who are watching right now. Are they going to be pleased with some of the stuff they see here in Grey Goo?
I think they're going to be ecstatically pleased with what they see here in Grey Goo. There's a lot of things that we've learned from Universe at War and a lot of other RTSs of going back to that core and building a good core RTS that is going to make a lot of people happy in playing Grey Goo with all of our three factions.
Awesome. Well, I was just going to get to that. That is one of the things that really made Universe at War what it was to me, which was that all three factions were both very different from each other and very different from anything else I'd played in other RTSs. So let's go through a little bit of what makes the factions in Grey Goo really unique. So let's start with the beta. Now, you said the beta are kind of the middle ground, good for people getting to know the game and start the game out at the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah, we actually, like I said, when we started building Grey Goo, we said, hey, let's look at everybody's play styles. You know, there's this huge amount of play styles that everybody plays. There's, turtlers, there's aggressive people,
right,
and then there's everybody in between. And we wanted to say, hey, we wanted to make a faction for that everyone's going to be able to find and relate themselves to. And the beta faction is that middle ground where they find, it's the entry point into Grey Goo where you're going to be able to kind of play it turtly if you want. You can play it aggressive if you want. But it's very modular and customizable, so you can get to your gameplay style and find where you want to specialize into.
Cool. Yeah, and when you say modular, you don't mean that in a general sense. You mean that very literally. These guys build their bases and their structures in a very modular way, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So the beta faction actually is based off this like facility type design where there's this central power core that has n number of connections that you can put supporting buildings on. So when you start off, you have this your base HQ that supports 4 power connections that you just start saying, hey, do you want to put a refinery on there and start increasing your economic expansion? Do you want to put a factory on there and increase your production capabilities, or do you start wanting to add tech buildings that actually change your diversity and composition of your actual factories?
Right. So you're playing this balancing game, this balancing act of, do I want to have lots and lots of units? Do I want to have a wide arrangement of different kinds of units? And how technologically advanced do I want those units to be? How you make those decisions of how many of each node to produce and how to arrange your buildings is going to directly affect the balance of those three things.
Exactly. And how many eggs do you want to put in a basket type of gameplay? Where it's like, if I put one small power hub that has 2 connections, I got a nice isolated facility here. But if I put a large one where it has everything on there, all the techs and these huge big factory bays that produce 3 units at a time, that's a lot of tech right there in one position that makes a nice juicy target for your opponent.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. It's a major consideration when you're attacking someone's base is how you can best cripple them, and you can make very interesting decisions to change and anticipate and defend against that with them, and I like that. Another thing that's also you would say is modular about them as well is that they have mounting points on some of their structures, like their walls, for instance, and they can put different units on those to serve different purposes, right?
Exactly. So not just their base configuration, but their unit designs as well, or have those kind of modularity where it's like, hey, you can build your wall, you can customize that wall to the type of defenses you need. You're looking at the building, your base building, you're thinking, hey, how modular does this need to be? Am I going to go fortressy and keep everything condensed? Do I go disperse it across the map? Am I making an economic facility here? Am I making a production facility? Maybe this is going to be an air base. Customizing all of that for you within the faction is really what that brings to it.
Awesome. So then we have the human faction, and it's interesting because usually the human faction in these games is the all-arounder or the one for beginners, but the humans here are actually a little bit more advanced and technical in the way you have to think about them, and I like that. So these guys are the big base builders, and their base building mechanic is unique from the other factions in a big way, right?
Yeah, the humans are very, very unique from both the other 2 factions in the game. And it is all about this idea that you have this big central power core that you're attaching different structures to, and each of these structures have different shapes. And so as you're building this base, you're really playing this game of almost like a mini Tetris game of where you're trying to do that base planning and saying, hey, I'm going to build a factory here. I'm attaching tech to it to give it this capability. Now, how am I going to put additional factories on here?
And everything has to be continuous. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Everything's continuous. So you're thinking about how you're building this base out and how you're building in redundancies. How are you going to then expand to it? And the humans are these ideas of this masters of teleportation. So as you're building this base, you might start off a base that's really, really condensed. All the buildings are attached. But then you're ready to expand out and push out and grow your base. You may want to have to rearrange what you have there and start expanding out. Now, as a human base gets bigger, you really start creating this almost like a tower defense type of fortress that your opponent's going to have to crack. Because as you build conduits and you build these structures that like come almost run like a power extension cord, you're able to say, hey, I'm going to put a building further away from my base. And you're left with these choices of saying, hey, do I want to build a new one there, or do I want to teleport one of the existing structures I have into this new location and expand upon it?
Yeah, which is really exciting. Just the idea, we talked about how in every RTS, when you get a look at someone's base, you kind of know where you have to hit and you know where they're producing what from.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they go away, they have that as previously seen, view that shows you, hey, this is what you saw last time you were there. So if someone were to, take a visit, do some scouting, take a look, and then leave, you could actually rearrange everything and totally mess up their plans so that when they come back next time, they're not going to be seeing the same configuration they saw when they came.
Exactly. The humans are really about making their base not just their own base and this big great fortress. It's also about making them their own. It's a weapon of its own. Whether it's you get to see the configuration and you're using the stealth detection tower to block last scene so that when the player comes and sees it and then they go away, your base is all of a sudden invisible and they're like, wait, what was that configuration layout you had, or rearranging the turret so that you exposed a weakness to him and now he's going to hit you from that side, but in reality you've reconfigured your base to make that your strong hard point really and having to come after it.
Yeah, nice way to get in your opponent's head. I really like that kind of stuff. So then finally, and most importantly, because this is the first time they've been seen anywhere, is the third and final faction, the one for which the game is named, the Goo.
Yep.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about how this very entirely unique and out there faction functions.
Right. So the Grey Goo which is the namesake of the game, on that whole spectrum of people like to base build, people like to be somewhere in the middle of the road, or there's this extremely aggressive faction. The Goo is this extremely aggressive faction, right? They're the race of nanites, right? What can nanites do? What would happen if you have this big clump of goo that's all these nanites that are devouring and eating everything that's around them, and being able to construct whatever they need? And so the Grey Goo as a faction is actually a structure-independent faction where you have this central mother goo, which is able to separate it off itself and produce units for it, and then really be flexible. We really kind of say that the goo is really about flexibility, mobility, and being fun, and bringing that to the forefront.
Right.
And that really happens through all the mechanics of it, what we do, where it's like you go with the mother goo, you go and you gather resources, which causes the goo to grow. And then as you're moving across the map, you're deciding, well, now is a good time to take some of that growth and separate it off into units that are formless, that can move around the map. And then, you're really thinking, okay, I got this nice big formless glob that's coming and attacking units, but I really need something specialized. And the goo actually has this ability to take itself and kind of like solidify itself into a unit with a very specific purpose, where it can then apply that purpose and bring in another unit to bear that is very specialized in a role for it to accomplish.
Right, because you have these large formless mother, and then the kind of offshoots of the mother goo, the small and medium and large size proteins that come off them as well. And those don't have to take a form until you decide, hey, this is what I need. And those things can also they can roll right over all forms of terrain. Like you have a terrain system here where you have cliffs and high ground and low ground, but they can completely ignore that and kind of just roll through into the back door of a base and then see what's there and be like, okay, we need this, this, and this, and switch things up. And I also like what you showed is that they can just kind of devour. Like you can just run one of those mother goos into a group of dudes and just like eat them up and grow bigger from it.
Yeah, we really took that core concept of like, what would a massive goo of nanites, would that really be stopped by a wall or by a mountain range? No, they just kind of like roll right over it, and bringing that to the gameplay has been a lot of fun, and it's actually brought something very new and interesting to the gameplay, because when you're playing with goo or you're playing against goo, the strategies and tactics you use, you're really thinking about, well, who am I playing against? What am I doing? How am I going to play against this? What are the strategies and tactics I might favor? How do I adapt those to work against the opponent type I have to go against, which has brought a lot of depth to the gameplay that we've seen.
Sure. I was saying while we were taking a look at this, if I was ever unaware of the kind of opponent that I was facing, and I had built my base assuming that cliff cover was gonna take care of the rear defense on my base, and I saw this huge blob rolling over the horizon, I would be having a really bad day. But it would be really awesome.
Yes.
So getting on to just a couple of the things that make it Grey Goo unique as a whole mechanically. Now, you have this QWERTY hotkey system, because hotkeys are big for a lot of more advanced players who want to be able to control their macro and their micro at once. In other words, they want to be able to control their base production and their unit production while they're out in the field. So how does this system that you've put in place streamline that?
Well, we took a look at how players play and what hotkeys they use and where do their hands rest on the keyboard, what's comfortable, what's the fastest way to execute commands. And then we said, hey, what is the player's mind share and what is he paying attention to on the screen? And where does he want to keep that attention when he's thinking about these secondary objects or what objectives he's trying to do? And the QWERTY menu system that we envisioned and then developed is that you can look at the battle, look and decide that, your battle's going a certain way, you might be losing a lot of your artillery. You might need to produce the artillery. Through the QWERTY system, you can keep the vision on the actual screen of where your battle is, and then hotkey through to the menu system to say, hey, build me my artillery that I'll need. And it'll find the best factories and that'll produce those units as quickly as possible and get them out into the field. That's
really smart. And that also leads into one of the other things that you guys have done, which is you've created some tools for automating production as well. Is that right?
Yep. So one of the elements is that, people think about, the staple of, hey, I need a reinforcements. I know I'm regularly going to need these types of units, whether it be, Predator tanks or it's going to be, howitzer artillery. And you're having these units be auto-queued so that they generally get produced in a queue system that naturally occurs. And as a player, you know what you want. You know you want it delivered. You've built your economy so that it's going to support this, and you're really thinking about that production and economy relationship and getting it to the position you like so that, hey, it's going the way you want, and then you expand upon it when you're ready. But it's not something you always have to constantly go back to and manage unless it's going to get interrupted. And when it gets interrupted, those are the challenges we want you to focus on, not just the general maintenance of it.
Right, not having to remember every 15 seconds, hey, pylons and probes, like being able to go and make the decisions on the battlefield you need to make without worrying about, whether or not you missed that last, spore injection, like if you're playing Zerg in StarCraft 2, or, it's keeping on. I mean, for pros, it's great to have to manage that challenge, but I like how this kind of frees you up to make the tactical battlefield decisions a little bit more free from worrying about what's going on at home.
Right.
That's really good.
We really wanted it to be about the composition. So if you're going to go and interrupt that, and you are going to interact with that system of that production, we wanted it to be a meaningful choice as to why are you coming back to in here, right? It's not maintenance. It's about a strategic choice. You're making a choice to do it, whether it be you took a hit and you need to readjust it because to accommodate just so you don't shut yourself down, or, hey, your battle's going a little bit differently, and now you need to change the composition, or you need an infusion of something. Those are the interactions we wanted to be forefront in the player's mind, that those are the ones they're going to keep coming back to and thinking about, so that when you're thinking about all the choices you're making, it's an important choice for your gameplay as it goes.
Yeah, keeping a focus on decision making rather on necessarily always mechanical skill. I really like it. So Grey Goo is going to be releasing this fall on Steam. Is that correct?
That's coming out on Steam this fall.
Awesome. And there's a pre-alpha coming up too as well, right?
Yep. Very shortly there's going to be a pre-alpha and then a closed beta and open beta that we're going to be doing for Grey Goo that people can get into.
Awesome. Very exciting. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. That's Grey Goo. For everything you want to know about Petroglyph's new RTS, keep it locked right here to IGN.